Should you study at the National Open University of Nigeria? Well, I'm going to be answering that question in this video. I will share my own experiences as a student of the National Open University of Nigeria, and I will tell you about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if that interests you, make sure you stick around and then make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you can get more of my content. I usually talk about education, about entrepreneurship, and about things that are inspirational. So click on that subscribe button and you will be able to get more of my content. My name is Olumide Adeleye and we will go right into this. So, should you study at the National Open University of Nigeria? I think I should begin this by explaining what open learning is. There are three words that you're likely to come across when it comes to, open learning. You might hear open learning, you might hear distance learning, you might also hear e-learning. Those three words are very related, but they don't necessarily mean exactly the same thing. Open learning is a system that makes use of centers, study centers. So you learn by going to a study center, by having some form of interaction with the main school or the main university through a go-between, a study center. Distance learning, on the other hand, just implies that the learning does not physically involve you, the student, and the lecturer in the same room. So they're learning over distance. That can be through study centers. It can also be through the internet. So that is distance learning. And then there is e-learning. Of course, e-learning makes use of electronic technology, makes use of the internet. So you would typically hear about courses that are done online and all of that. That is e-learning. So those three statements are often used together. They mean around the same thing, but like I have explained, they are not always exactly the same. Okay, now let's go over to the National Open University of Nigeria. Let me begin by saying that the idea of the National Open University of Nigeria became fully fledged in the tenure of President Olusegun Obasanjo. You might remember that time when he founded or when he commissioned the Open University, and then he went ahead to become one of its first students. He set a good example, in my own opinion, by becoming one of the first students, and then he earned a degree, went ahead for his master's degree, and eventually did a PhD through the National Open University of Nigeria. In my own opinion, President Olusegun Obasanjo should be known as the father of the National Open University of Nigeria. But anyway, that's just my opinion. The second thing I want to say in that regard is that the idea of open learning is actually very popular around the world. There are different countries that have their own examples or their own institutions of open and distance learning. So for example, in South Africa, you might have heard about UNISA, the University of South Africa. It uses a similar model. You might have heard about the University of London, which uses distance learning. You might have heard about Open University, also in the UK. You might have heard about open universities in Australia. You might have heard about Athabasca University in Canada. These are examples of universities that operate either the open or the distance learning models. And of course, I'm sure you know about many e-learning universities around the world as well. As a matter of fact, today, many of the traditional brick and mortar universities, meaning the ones with physical structures and regular classes, many of them are also shifting to some form of open and distance learning, or better still, e-learning in today's world thanks to COVID-19. So now that we've established what the National Open University of Nigeria is all about, I think I should add that In Nigeria, the Open University makes use of centers, study centers, and there are study centers in virtually every state. I think there are like 50-something study centers scattered across Nigeria. And you can walk into any of them to pursue any of the courses that they offer. The next thing I would like to talk about is my own experience. So I graduated more than 10 years ago with a degree in agricultural economics and farm management. And if you know anything about me today, you know that I am very far from that. So I hated that course, true confession. I hated the course, I hated every minute of it. And I just did all I could to get out of that system with my certificate. So after completing that course, I decided to travel to India to explore my true passions. And so I got into ICT, I got into the media arts and stuff like that in India. But one of the things that I realized, upon getting back to Nigeria was that I needed some form of qualification, and I mean educational qualification, maybe some form of degree in the field that I was now in the media arts. Getting that degree became very difficult because my background was in the sciences all along. And so moving over to the arts seemed impossible. And then one day it occurred to me that I could go to the Open University, the National Open University of Nigeria, and I could pursue my educational aspirations there. That was how I got into the National Open University of Nigeria. So let's move to the next thing. I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly because I want to help you to make the right decision. Is this for you? Should you try it out? And all of that. So let's begin with the good. The first major advantage of studying at the National Open University of Nigeria is that it is an accredited institution of higher learning. Remember that it was set up by the government, so obviously they did all they needed to do to get it fully accredited by the National Universities Commission. So the National Open University of Nigeria issues certificates that are just as valid as certificates obtained at any of the federal institutions in Nigeria. You can use them for anything, master's level study, getting a job, whether it's a federal government job or a private sector job or whatever. The certificates are just as valid. Of course, I know there's a bit of a recognition issue, but I'll talk about that when I'm talking about the disadvantages. Another advantage I'd like to talk about is the obvious fact that you can learn while doing other things. For example, you can work full-time and you can still be in school. That is a big plus to studying at the National Open University of Nigeria. And so what that means is you can still advance yourself, you can gain that extra credential without having to stop your job, without having to leave your job. Take me, for example, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a full-time workload. I have so many things to do and so many things to oversee. And yet I can still go ahead and pursue further education thanks to a model like that of the National Open University of Nigeria. So if you're in a situation where you're looking to, do better or have that extra credential, stop holding on. Just go ahead and register at the Open University. Number 3, which is very similar to the last point I raised, is that you don't need to attend classes. And I love that. So there's something called TMA. I think that's Tutor Marked Assessments or something like that. It means that you have to do some form of continuous assessment. But except for that, you do not need to attend classes. And even the TMAs can be done online. So that advantage of not attending classes is important to people like me. When I was pursuing my undergraduate studies at the University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, which was still is a federal university, I encountered certain things that I felt were very discouraging. One of them was that I would be, sometimes in a lecture hall with over 1,000 students. and many times the sound system would not even work properly. So imagine being in a hall that would be so congested and everybody would be sweating like Christmas goats, and then a lecturer would be screaming instructions from the front of the classroom. For me, it was very discouraging, and at a stage, I simply stopped attending most of the classes. I think that this system of open education is good because in a situation where the university system, and this applies to most of our federal and state universities, so I'm not dissing my alma mater, but in a situation where the system is such that resources are not enough and students have to learn under such conditions, then open learning makes a lot of sense because there's no requirement to attend lectures. As a matter of fact, there are no lectures. There may be some tutorials here and there, but there are no lectures. I think it is perfect for people like me. Obviously, it might not work for everybody, but for someone like me, it is just perfect. Number 4, learning at the National Open University of Nigeria is very fast. You can enroll and then you can plan your graduation dates because there are no things like ASU strike. I think that that's a very important advantage because, in the Nigerian university system, especially the public university system, for most people, when you enroll, it is 4 or 5 years plus X being the time that you would spend at home thanks to ASU strike. Well, with the Open University, your classes are not affected by ASU. One other advantage I'd like to talk about is that the learning materials are standardized. As a matter of fact, at the point of registration, you pay for your learning materials as well, and then you can read those and use those to prepare for your exams and your TMAs. What that implies is that unlike a lot of federal or state-owned universities where you need to buy handouts and you are more or less held to ransom by the different lecturers in the name of purchasing handouts, well, that doesn't really apply at the National Open University of Nigeria. Everything is standardized. You buy that, you pay for it, and that is it. That is what your exams are going to be set based on. And here is one other advantage that applied in my own context. In my center, most of the people you would interact with, whether they're co-students or the members of staff, are very nice. Now, I know that that won't be everybody's experience, but for me, I came across a good number of really nice and really helpful people, and in that regard, I think that they did very well. Okay, so now I've told you the good parts, the great parts, but I should also tell you the not so good parts. So let's look at the bad parts to this. Number 1, little or no classes. So I know I mentioned that as an advantage. For someone like me, that would be a big advantage, but I'm sure that for many other people, that would be a very terrible disadvantage because they would prefer to be taught, by actual people and to see lecturers and interact with their lecturers. In this system, you don't really have that. In a few scenarios, you might have to do some practicals depending on the course that you're studying and all of that. But generally speaking, interaction that has to do with lecturers, classes, things like that are very, very limited. And so that might be a very big disadvantage, especially for people who are doing this as their first degree. Number 2, the timetables can sometimes be erratic. So sometimes you just find out that they made a new decision and decided to probably postpone exams or postpone TMAs or something like that. The timetables can be erratic. I think that's a bit of the Nigerian factor, but I also think it is very unfortunate. I think that that is something that should be worked on. Number 3, I wish they would send emails. How do I mean? I've tried out some other distance learning systems outside of Nigeria, and I know that using emails is a culture. It's a way that helps you to, keep in touch with the school for almost anything. At the National Open University of Nigeria, it's more like you get the mails maybe only for the official things, like for example, you made a payment and then you get an email from remitter. But for most of the things that have to do with your learning, you have to follow on your own. I don't think that that is good enough. I think that the system should be made in such a way that at every point there's an email telling you what you've done and what you need to do next. Another disadvantage that I think is similar to the one I just raised is I feel that for certain things, there's too much dependence on study centers. So for example, if I want to register, if I want to confirm my registration, and things like that, I want to confirm my eligibility to sit for exams and stuff like that, I want to print out my ID card. I think that these are things I should be able to do on my own. And I know, yes, on the portal, theoretically, those can be done, but then the study center still has to approve and then stamp on it and all of that. I think it is rather clumsy. I think that these things should be simplified and people should be able to do all of it at home. Because the truth is, like I said, I've tried out some other systems outside of Nigeria and I know that these things are actually possible. It's not like heaven will fall if candidates can do everything themselves. No, not at all. There are ways that other universities outside of Nigeria are doing these things effectively, and I think we can still borrow from such cultures. Yet another downside is, for some candidates, you might experience recognition issues. So yes, I said that the National Open University of Nigeria is accredited, and it is accredited. It is fully accredited. It is fully valid. But your credential has to be presented in a real world. And we know how the real world works. If you take a certificate from the National Open University of Nigeria to an employer, a number of employers, especially in the private sector, might choose to favor someone from a traditional brick-and-mortar university system. That is sad, but it is a reality that you have to face. So again, like I said, you get to a level where those things don't really matter. I am an entrepreneur. It's not like I'm looking for a job, so it doesn't make any difference. I just like the idea of developing myself. I'm sure there are many people like me. I'm sure that there are many people also that this is what works for them. I hope that with time, the recognition, the discrimination against certificates from places like the Open University will reduce and people will be able to recognize it better. But for now, I must be honest with you, it is a reality that you should consider if you're thinking of studying at the National Open University of Nigeria. And while still on that note, I think I should also mention that if you are a student at the National Open University, don't feel inferior. Your certificate is not in any way inferior. And if people in the society choose to treat it as they like, it is up to you to carry yourself with the kind of prestige and honor that you deserve. And if you do so, ultimately, people are going to buy into you. So if I am employing someone, for instance, I don't care whether you're from the Open University or if you studied through distance learning or online, it makes no difference. I want to see how well you can perform on the job. And I think that that is a very important piece of advice to people who are students at the National Open University of Nigeria. One other downside is a lot of the TMAs had exact wording questions. What do I mean by that? They lifted quotes from the study materials and they wanted those things to be, the gaps to be filled in. And that was an overwhelming number of questions. I don't think that that is appropriate. I think that that doesn't really test understanding. I think that instead it tests the ability to cram information. And that is something that sadly applies a lot to the Nigerian educational system. I think it should be changed. We need education that focuses more on what people understood as against their abilities to use exact words. And one final downside. Well, this was a personal experience. Like I said, almost everybody that I have encountered at the National Open University of Nigeria has been very nice. But there was this particular member of staff that I needed something from. I needed to collect some materials from. And then I went to him and I asked for the right procedure to do so. And the man told me, okay, go over there, write your name and come back. So I did exactly what he said. And when I got back to him, told him I had written my name, he asked for where I wrote my name. I indicated, and then the man shouted at me, "Get away from here. I am not going to attend to you today." And all of that. And I looked at the man and I said, "But you told me to write there." And the man flared up, said he wasn't even going to attend to any student anymore, and all that. And then I refused to leave the place. I told him that I had a right to be attended to. And you see, for me, I'm not a child anymore. When I was an undergraduate, I could go to class and I could cringe when lecturers were shouting and all of that, because that's one of the downsides of the Nigerian university system. We've been taught to think that that is right. But over time, like I said, I graduated more than 10 years ago. I've had some exposure. There are some things I'm not going to stand anymore. So I told him that I wasn't going with that, and then I went to make a report with the customer service. And this is the beautiful thing. They handled the situation beautifully. I got the materials that I needed, and then they also explained to me that the man who was shouting was under pressure because he was actually a very hard-working man, according to them. He had worked so hard and, worked more or less overnight, and that he was always doing that consistently to be able to meet up with the needs of students. So I understood his plight, even though I still did not excuse that behavior, but I understood it. I think that for me, that is still something that needs to be worked on, particularly in Nigerian institutions, not only the National Open University of Nigeria. I think it's a general attitudinal problem. Okay, so I'm done with the bad. I've told you the good, I've told you the bad. Now let us look at the ugly. Well, so far, I have not seen anything that I would classify as ugly. And so that takes me to my conclusion. My honest piece of advice for you is, if you are staying at home, you need to develop yourself some more, you need an extra credential, consider the National Open University of Nigeria. I think it is helpful to be able to spend your time knowing that you've done something extra, you've gained a new skill, you've gained a new qualification, because you never know when it is going to be relevant. And remember that this is a valid qualification. It isn't overly expensive. Just give it a shot. Okay, so that is it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer your questions. Let me know in the comments. And if you have anything that you'd like to say as well, give me a shout out. I'll be happy to respond to you. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that you can get more of my videos. I'm going to be posting a lot of educational videos, entrepreneurship videos, and inspirational videos. I look forward to seeing you in the very next video. Have a lovely day.